Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. Today we're talking about the reporting in the Sunday Times that Gwede Mantashe has gone after Helen Zille. But before we talk about that, there's something that I think is worth mentioning about the Sunday papers and the stories that they've chosen to run with today. I would have expected all of the newspapers at this particular stage to be doing full analysis of the opening of Parliament address, the opening of the 7th administration address. But it doesn't look as if that's what they're going with. They're going with this reporting on Gwede Mantashe, and they're going with different reporting in different publications. But that's peculiar to me because at this particular point, shouldn't the focus be on everything that the president discussed and where things stand after 50 days, which is when 50 days after the election? It seems to me that the media doesn't want to offer a criticism of the opening of Parliament address because it was very much a repetition of a lot of speeches that President Ramaphosa has given before, from 2018 even until February this year, where the State of the Nation was given. Number two, the opening of Parliament showed me that there's still a lot of issues in the coalition, because it was meant to be an announcement of the resolutions of the ministerial strategy session, which was held last week. But we heard nothing about that. So the ministers had been saying to us, well, there's going to be the strategy session. We're all going to come together. We're all going to sort out our issues. But that didn't happen. So when the president gave this remix speech of promises that he had made before, the question that was left in my mind is what happened to the strategy session. Number three, the opening of Parliament address showed to me, and I think it's reasonable to conclude, that the president and the ANC still want to roll out the ANC strategic plans, their medium-term plans, and their other plans, and that this is not necessarily what the Democratic Alliance wants to do. They want to be able to contribute to that strategy, to that direction. But the fact that President Ramaphosa still went and announced that, they are running with all of the ANC promises, that to me showed that there may be more cracks here than we anticipate. So what is the Sunday Times reporting? The Sunday Times is reporting that Gwede Mantashe has warned the Democratic Alliance federal leader Helen Zille against acting like a parallel president. And he has called her behaviour the biggest threat to the survival of the government of national unity. He made these remarks at his offices in Cape Town on the same day that President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed a joint sitting of Parliament where he outlined the cabinet agenda and what this coalition government would be working on. Mantashe said that, the GNU, that's what they're calling it, right? This coalition is moving closer. The parties are moving closer to each other. But he accused Zille of wanting the DA's ministers to regard her as the boss. And he said that this could collapse the power sharing deal. Right? Now, he said his criticism is based on what he sees and reads when he logs on to social media. Officials in his office, according to Sunday Times, say that he was talking about Zille's public statements on social media and in media interviews. The example that they cited is an interview that Zille gave to Newsroom Africa, where she said the president does not control all ministers and ministries, and that ministers have relative autonomy to run their departments. Now, that's a real clash of power, clash of understanding, clash of dynamics. You really can't have this kind of a conversation or different of interpretation without there being some clashes. Because as the chairperson of the ANC, Gwede Mantashe views himself as the custodian of the interest of the ANC in the same way that Helen Zille views herself as a custodian of the interests of the Democratic Alliance long term, because the ministers, including even the leader of the party, John Steenhuisen, may get caught up in the day-to-day of being in government. But Helen is still thinking about the next elections that are coming up, local government elections, which are in 2 years, and then national elections, which are also in 5 years. But still, it's a short amount of time. And if you've been around the block a few times, and I think Helen Zille considers herself to be a veteran, she's obviously going to be thinking about the long-term health and well-being of the Democratic Alliance. Right. When she was asked about this, Helen Zille said that she was doing a comparison with the German system that facilitates coalition governments. Right? She said, I think the predictable consequences of the GNU collapsing are one of the main reasons that will hold it together. It is absolutely essential for South Africa's future that it works. So she's being conciliatory, right? But Mantashe has been saying, one thing we must never assume is that all of us are the same. There will be disagreements. A government of this nature requires maturity. It requires people to disabuse themselves of the narrative they developed for campaigning. Appreciate that it's not campaigning now. We must make the government work to the benefit of South Africans. If we can't do that, it will collapse. I can assure you. My own view is that at this point in time, the signs are that we are moving closer to each other rather than working to collapse it. The only worry when I open social media is when we have a parallel president called Helen Zille outside who wants DA ministers to account to her. She is going to collapse it if she continues, because we are not going to have a parallel government run by Helen Zille. There is one president here, and that president is Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa. And that's it. Ministers in the government understand that. External interference must be corrected, said Mantashe. Now, all of this is happening as there are plans from the presidency to actually make sure that they set up something that is known as Policy Coordination and Advisory Services, PCAS, right? How do you acronymize that? PCAS, how do you say that? The PAS. Okay. Anyway, I'll call it the PAS. I think the Policy Advisory Services. I think that makes more sense, right? Which will act as a gatekeeper for policy and programs from ministers. Now, this is going to be something that becomes a bit of a challenge and shows the tension that exists. Because if the ANC from the presidency through its Ministry of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation is trying to say, we are going to set up consultants, we are going to set up a system that keeps DA ministers on point in respect to implementation of our policies. That will make DA ministers feel like they don't have autonomy. I don't think that some of the remarks that are coming from Helen Zille are coming from her. She's just the one who has been asked to say these things because she's not in the cabinet, and then she can act as the bad cop, so to speak. If you remember, the movie trope, good cop, bad cop. It seems as if to me that Helen Zille is being put as the bad cop, whereas John and all of these other guys in the cabinet are saying, oh no, it's all good. We love this coalition. Everything is going good. But Helen is saying, hey, wait a minute, we need autonomy. We need to be able to execute our agenda. And this is what is causing some of the tension, right? So if you think about it and you think about further what has been said, the Minister of Monitoring and Evaluation in the presidency, Maropene Ramokgopa, has said that the presidency would use these policy advisory services to ensure that ministers towed the line and implemented programs in line with the statement of intent. Towing whose line, right? Because there's not been a strategic session that has come up with anything definitive, which is what you said you were going to show us. So it sounds to me that, there's an attempt to make sure that the DA doesn't have autonomy. Ramokgopa told Sunday Times, right, that Ramaphosa had given her additional powers to keep GNU ministers in check through these policy advisory services. She said she would be able to ensure ministers, listen to the words here, she would be able to ensure ministers strictly followed the policy decisions agreed to in the statement of intent and did not try to implement the policies of their own parties. This is serious, right? She said that these policy advisory services would be a buffer between individual ministers and the executive collective, similar to the role played by the presidential advisor Joel Nechinedze, right? I mispronounced that, during former President Thabo Mbeki's presidency. Before proposing any program to the cabinet, ministers would first have to present it to the policy advisory services, who would then approve or reject the proposal based on the statement of intent. And this is what she says. So there's absolutely no policy, no program, or no activity that would go to the cabinet before it goes to the policy advisory services to assess its quality, but also to assess if it's in line with the policy of the plan that we've all adopted. Yo, that's quite intense, right? That's quite intense. And that's something that we have to really think about in terms of what does that mean for power sharing within this particular program. So Ramokgopa said that the Cabinet Lekgotla, which convened a week ago, unanimously agreed on a program of action that took into account the statement of intent, all 11 party manifestos, priorities, as well as key performance indicators. She said that all parties had agreed to this because they could see their own manifestos in the plan. Now we're taking it through the process of cabinet committee, then it will be adopted in the cabinet. So it means that these policy advisory services will have to make sure that the annual performance plans of different departments are aligned with that agreement which we have, which is a plan of the entire government. So anything that is outside of that will be kicked out. We will write back to the department to say, no, it can't come through because it is contradicting the plan that we all agreed upon. She's talking about a plan. The president was supposed to announce a plan. He said, I don't have a plan to announce. We still have to go to another strategy session to work out the plan. But from the discussion that we're reading here, it seems as if there's already a plan that has already been put in place. So what's happening? What's happening here? This is a serious question that needs to be asked, right? The PCAs. So hold on. Okay, so anything that will be outside, that will be kicked out. Ramokgopa said these policy advisory services function would be ensured there would be no crisis of incompatible policy aims. These PCAS will buffer, as you are saying, will act as a buffer. Hold on, what am I reading here? These policy advisory services will buffer. As you are saying, there's a plan that we all agreed upon. That is a plan of the government, not the government of the DA or the ANC, but a plan that the cabinet as a whole has agreed and adopted and passed. We will all stick to that, she said. Anything that is not in line with that won't go to the cabinet, and you can't implement anything that is not being passed by the cabinet. You can't. It doesn't work that way. So there's no crisis here. We're fine. This sounds, they're creating layers. Before a DA minister can talk to cabinet, the DA minister has to actually talk to the ministry in the presidency for prior approval. And if this doesn't sound like power sharing, this sounds like enforcement of ANC policy on the DA. It doesn't sound fair in any event. And I think Helen Zille may have a point here, right? So I think there's been some frustration within the ANC around the behavior of the ministers who started making announcements earlier. And this is an attempt to now try to get those ministers back in line and to try to prevent them from being able to get, distinguished credit for whatever they're doing. If you recall, I did a video as well on this where Dean McPherson revealed corruption that had led to the theft of 300 million rands. He also said that he was not going to buy any new properties for anybody in the cabinet, no new refurbishments. These are things that he said. So it's very likely that there's some pressure and tension as a result of this. And if you recall, Sports and Culture Minister has also, Gayton McKenzie, been capturing the imagination of the public by talking about, super fans, by revealing of all of those who received funding from the department during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also other people who received funding. So there may be a frustration that, okay, if this continues, our ministers may not be able to do this, playing to the crowd type of policy intervention because it makes us look bad. And the things that these guys are getting credit for, Dean McPherson, as well as Gayton McKenzie, are, transparency about funds, transparency about corruption. And ANC may not feel that they're able to do this. So they're trying to bring everything back into line, hambang line, basically. My final thoughts on this. This does not look like maturity on both sides of the table. They are all resolving their issues through the media, bringing dirty linen to the media. The election was 53 days ago. And in 53 days, we've had so many flare-ups. Letters were leaking during the negotiation process. Now the chairperson of the ANC is telling the federal leader of the DA that they are not going to be a parallel president. There's only one president. And in the meantime, also saying that, we must all be mature. What? How is this all maturity? How is any of this maturity? How is any of this supposed to assure markets, investors, the general public that this is going to be something which actually leads to areas where their lives are affected being better? Because remember, as things stand right now, there are areas where the public really meets government. They meet government at a police station. They meet government at home affairs. They meet government at a clinic. They meet government also when they are driving on the roads. But they also meet government in other areas of service. Right now, in a school, for example, in a classroom. Right now, nothing has changed about the classrooms of South Africa. They're the same as they were 50 days ago, 100 days ago. They are the same. Nothing has changed. Right now, nothing has changed about clinics. Nothing has changed about hospitals. The Ward 5 somewhere, is still Ward 5. I'm talking about a hospital ward. Nothing has changed in the hospital. What has changed in a police station, if you go there today, about the way they take affidavits, about dockets going missing, about what has changed about safety in townships? Nothing. Nothing has changed. So even if you think Home Affairs, what has changed? If you go there today, what will be the difference from 70 days ago? This is what people want. They want service delivery. They want an improvement in how they encounter government. And that hasn't happened. And this fighting, this posturing, doesn't look to me like it will improve anything that the people care about. Second final thought is that the ANC has to give DA some autonomy and some wiggle room in these cabinet positions that they've allocated to them. It is an ANC-led coalition, but that doesn't mean that the ANC gets to dictate everything. And right now it looks as if the ANC is trying to really frustrate these ministers by creating more and more layers. I mean, what kind of system is it where I'm a minister, but before I present to the general cabinet, I have to first present my ideas to a policy advisory service of consultants and people who are not elected? How does that work so that they can report to Maropini Ramokgopa and then she can get to approve before it goes to cabinet when they are equals in the cabinet? There's no better minister. The ministers are equal in the cabinet. So I think that the ANC is really trying to reduce how much autonomy and independence the Democratic Alliance has in this coalition, and I don't think that's fair. I don't think that that's fair. Finally, I think that the fact that all of these DA ministers have ANC deputy ministers and are also working with pre-existing director generals of the departments that they oversee does not indicate any appetite to shift gears or share real power. And this is really going to be the challenge that this GNU has. So I think that there are cracks in this coalition that is being referred to as a GNU. And I think that if there's no power sharing, this coalition may not last the whole 5 years. It may not last the whole 5 years. What do you guys think, though? Do you think that Gwede Mantashe is justified? Do you think that Helen Zille is justified? Let's have a conversation. Thank you so much to all of those who've subscribed. I really appreciate your subscriptions. I really appreciate the conversations that we have in the comments, whether we agree or disagree. That's what we're here for, to have conversations that are better than the conversations that are happening on mainstream media, where we can think and reason together about this African moment, this South African moment, so that we can make better decisions about our own lives, our own investments, and really have an understanding of the moment of history that we're living through. Till the next one.